The celebration was for my sister's new job, a warm, intimate brunch organized by her friends and our family at the chic Nestlewood Eatery in downtown Portland. She had just secured a mid-level position with a rapidly expanding tech company, and the entire table brimmed with toasts, smiling faces, and tales that seemed to revolve solely around my sister, Aubrey. I found myself seated at the opposite end of the table next to the window. My coffee had long since cooled, yet I kept swirling it absent-mindedly, a comforting ritual I relied on to stay present. Nobody really paid attention to me, as usual, since my sister Aubrey drew all the attention to herself. She lounged gracefully, one leg draped over the other, while the sunlight made her engagement ring and freshly manicured nails shimmer. She called out to me across the table in a tone that was bright enough to leave a sting. "So what are you up to these days? Still freelancing? Isn't that a little old for you?" Before I could say anything, she chuckled and shifted her attention elsewhere, to her friend. She just couldn't seem to get a grip on a real career. I found myself thinking, maybe it was time for her to get a life already. Nobody else found it funny, just my sister, Aubrey, laughing at her own snide remark. Then she made it even more obvious by speaking even louder. Some folks only sponge off those who've achieved something instead of doing it themselves. I wasn't bothered. I didn't turn to face her. Instead, I pressed my lips together and kept stirring my food. My mother muttered, "Aubrey, enough." But my sister simply lifted her shoulders as if she didn't care. In my sister Aubrey's view of things, saying nothing meant you had already lost. My dad tried to steer the conversation elsewhere, mentioning something about the avocado toast being bland. Still, her sly smile lingered in the room like a silent challenge. Everyone believed I was unnoticeable, yet that very invisibility had become both my refuge and my advantage. What they didn't realize was that I, Rowan Graham, had co-founded Quantivex Solutions, one of the fastest rising analytics companies in the nation. And what made it even more satisfying was that Aubrey, my sister and the center of attention, had just accepted a position at Quantivex Solutions. She had no clue, and I wasn't going to spoil the secret. I'd long grown accustomed to being overlooked. This pattern existed well before celebratory brunches and work parties. I have a vivid memory of my 13th birthday. The cake had just arrived at the table. Someone lit the candles. The room filled as everyone gathered to sing. Just as I prepared to close my eyes and make my wish, my sister charged down the hallway, triumphantly holding an enormous trophy. She had just taken first place at the Pacific Regional Dance Classic. My mother called out the news with a voice that easily drowned out the birthday melody. The group applauded. Phones and flashes pivoted toward my sister, Aubrey. I stayed near my cake, watching the flames quiver. No one asked me what I wished for. I never even got to blow out the candles. In that moment, I realized for the first time that I would never be the main reason for anyone's celebration. Aubrey had been a natural entertainer from the start. Vivid, daring, always performing. I, on the other hand, preferred quiet. I enjoyed tackling riddles. Disassembling objects just to see how they functioned always fascinated me, whether it was remotes, toasters, or lines of code. That very year, I began developing my initial basic algorithm on the handed-down Chromebook my father had given me. I was completely enthralled. My mother loved to remark, "Rowan could stay put for 5 hours and you wouldn't hear a thing." My father liked to quip, "This house has both a firecracker and a flashlight. Figure out who's who." Actually, it's obvious. My sister Aubrey was undeniably the firecracker. I was the steady, overlooked light that quietly persisted. As we grew up, those dynamics stayed the same. Aubrey focused on media arts, made brief appearances on regional TV, and started a wellness company that went viral for a short time before folding due to financial struggles. I attended a modest tech college, designed systems, and graduated with honors. Not a single family member remembered when I graduated, since they were all caught up organizing a photo shoot for my sister's product launch, but I didn't hold any resentment. I simply began to create quietly, saying little. At 30, I teamed up with Elias Burton, my college roommate of many years, and together we started Quantivex Solutions. The two of us spent days programming at various coffee shops, pitching our ideas at startup expos, scraping by on ramen and audacious dreams. He took on the role of the company's public face, while I was the structural force behind everything. 4 years later, Quantivex Solutions was valued at over $120 million. I held just under 45% of its shares. Nowhere did my name appear publicly. And now Aubrey, my sister who had never seemed to notice the support behind the limelight, had just been brought on board at my firm. The official offer letter was sent out the following morning. Aubrey Caldwell, Budget Analyst, Quantivex Solutions. Salary confirmed. Starting date Tuesday. She was completely unaware that I had personally signed off on her approval. Only Elias knew the actual situation. He understood I'd never been just a remote technical advisor. In fact, I was one of the co-founders. Ever since our first day, we decided that only Elias's name would go public. He had the charisma, the presence, and the knack for connecting with people. My preference was always to work in the background on the underlying systems. I had seen what happened to founders who became public figures. Their lives were no longer their own. The spotlight was never for me. I valued solitude and autonomy above all else. Thus, at Quantivex Solutions, I was simply Rowan, the senior systems lead, who kept strange hours and did my best to dodge Zoom meetings. My visits to the office happened only once per week, always later than 7 p.m., by which time the hallways were empty and the espresso machine had already been put away. The following week, I managed our system designs, assessed department budgets, and made the major decisions from behind several layers of secure logins. Elias handled the public interactions and delivered the keynote speeches. He never revealed my identity, not even to our staff. Sometimes I questioned whether staying anonymous had been the right decision. Still, when I watched Aubrey Caldwell walk into the world I had shaped with determination and pride, I accepted that my actions had been necessary for myself. On her starting day, I stayed home, but I accessed the internal camera network, a covert tool I had developed myself. Through the kitchen camera on the 9th floor, I watched as my sister, Aubrey, poured herself coffee and confidently struck up a conversation with a coworker. "This place is wild," she commented. "Apparently nobody's ever met any of the founders. Rumor is that the second one is only a signature on paper." I found myself grinning at this. It certainly wasn't the first time I had been labeled a phantom. That afternoon, Elias Burton called me on FaceTime. "She's adapting quickly," he reported. "Polished, assertive, very much Aubrey. She still has no idea who's approving her work." "Are you all right with this for now?" I answered. "Let's keep things under wraps. If she's really here to do the job, that's fine. If she was only after recognition, the reality would reveal itself." I wasn't after vengeance. What I truly craved was understanding. I wanted to see how Aubrey Caldwell would behave when applause was absent. 3 weeks drifted by. I kept myself unseen until, one night, I was down in the basement server room reviewing backup security measures. The sound of heels clicking echoed through the hallway. When I emerged, she stood there. Motionless, she said, "Rowan, what brings you down here?" Her eyes narrowed in suspicion. "Only leaders are supposed to be allowed in," I replied with a calm smile. "Well, I guess that means I'm included," I said. Aubrey cocked her head, puzzled, just as Elias Burton exited the nearby storage room with a folder in hand. "Hey," he greeted me. "Could you sign off on the Q2 model before Friday?" I accepted the folder and glanced back at Aubrey. She didn't blink. She remained silent, But I sensed it, the fracture beginning. She'd just witnessed her first glimpse of reality, and I was eager to see what she would do next. Early that day, Portland was cloaked in fog, the sort that rendered the outlines of buildings faint and sketch-like. I had just approved the Q2 earnings report when I felt my phone vibrate. It turned out to be Elias Burton. He greeted me with a soft laugh. "I think your sister's beginning to see a bigger picture." I arched an eyebrow. In the same instant, an email alert from accounting popped up, the subject reading, "Unmatched signature RG85. Please verify executive authorization." I felt my heartbeat steady. This was the moment. A full 8 weeks had gone by since my sister, Aubrey Caldwell, officially started at Quantivex Solutions. During that period, she adapted quickly, self-assured in meetings, decisive about budgets. I quietly observed, green-lighting her proposals, but I never included my full name on the approvals. Up to now, she had only noticed my internal identifier, RG85 in budget approvals, contract notes, and finance instructions. The following morning, I found myself in the Comet Cafe, partially concealed behind a newspaper, when a voice I recognized rang out. "Who exactly is Rowan Graham?" Aubrey Caldwell questioned a co-worker. "That name keeps popping up in the budget documents. I keep noticing. It seems like nobody actually knows who this person is." Her teammate merely shrugged when I asked. "Rumor has it, she's sort of a phantom, only stepping in to authorize major moves." Aubrey scoffed. "Wonderful. Another faceless executive pulling strings. I never trust someone whose identity I can't confirm." My grip tightened around my coffee cup. She still hadn't figured things out. Not every reality needs to shout to be genuine. 4 days later, Aubrey strode directly into finance and formally asked for entry to the executive budget files. Her approved access level made getting it a breeze. I sifted through document after document until I opened the one listing my full name, Rowan Graham, co-founder, CTO. Each new page made it harder to sidestep the evidence. The very sister who once labeled me a charity case was now gazing at the signature behind her first official payment. Early that day, a notification appeared on my system. There was an internal access alert. I had been recognized in the logs. The executive archive had been accessed. My sister, Aubrey Caldwell, had reviewed the founding records. Elias Burton and I, listed as co-founders. Each of us held just under 45% of the equity. My title, Chief Technical Officer. The signature line read, R. Graham. I pictured my sister Aubrey right then, her gaze glued to the monitor, her face never changing. Aubrey never reacted dramatically in moments of surprise. She went completely silent, though her eyes seemed to smolder. I reached Quantivex Solutions before my regular time just to confirm what had happened. As expected, in the break room on the second floor, my sister Aubrey was standing by the counter, gripping a printout as though it could vanish at any second. "Are you all right?" I murmured as gently as I could. She turned around, her reply firm, barely above a whisper. "So, you're the co-founder?" I confirmed with a nod. "How long has it been?" she pressed. "Since it all began. Elias and I launched this in a tiny cafe on Burnside Street. Back in the days when you used to call me out for being jobless." Aubrey gave a sharp, sarcastic laugh. "So all this time, I've actually been reporting to you." "I've noticed you've been putting in solid effort," I said plainly. "That's why you're still part of the team." She dropped her gaze. I rifled through my folder and passed her a draft for a nonprofit data project. "We're rolling this out next quarter to improve tech availability in public schools. You'd be an ideal fit." She left the proposal untouched, but there was a subtle change in her demeanor. I moved to exit the room, understanding she needed time. Yet for the first time in years, my sister Aubrey didn't meet my eyes with contempt. Instead, there was only a calm acceptance, and perhaps a hint of remorse. The 6-year anniversary gala for Quantivex Solutions took place in a venue made of glass walls overlooking the Cascade Range. It was a contemporary architectural wonder set above Portland's skyline. In the dressing area reserved for guests, I found myself standing before the large mirror. The black dress I had chosen was understated and elegant. My hair was pulled back with meticulous care, complemented by a delicate flush of rose on my cheeks. My lips were the only touch of color I wore. I didn't choose my outfit to stand out. Instead, I dressed so I could blend into the occasion, even if that made me anxious. For as long as I could remember, I found peace in quietness and staying unnoticed. Yet tonight, there was a sense that everything was changing. Elias Burton tapped softly at my door and poked his head inside. "Are you ready, Rowan?" I let out a breath. I wasn't, but perhaps nobody ever truly is. Elias offered me a gentle smile. "This isn't a night to remain hidden. I'm here to take the spotlight I created." Together we moved out onto the stage from the side, timing our entrance with the dimming of the auditorium lights. The announcer's words rang out, perfectly crisp in the venue's remarkable acoustics. "Let's give a warm welcome to the two co-founders of Quantivex Solutions, Elias Burton and me." The applause was explosive, more intense than I could have imagined. I made my way forward with purpose, feeling every step, and that's when I noticed my sister. She lingered near the ballroom's edge, her fingers wrapped around a glass of champagne she hadn't touched. Her eyes were wide, halted mid-expression. She didn't blink. Inside her reality, where I'd always existed as the unseen one, everything had just been torn apart. I understood that sensation the day we finalized our first 8-figure contract. And it hit me that something we had created in secrecy was suddenly tangible, impossible to ignore. Elias Burton broke the silence first. He began sharing how Quantivex Solutions came into existence. It all started with just the two of us and a pair of laptops in a cramped apartment, pushing through storms and deadlines, risking everything for a smarter way to interpret the world's information. Laughter came at all the expected times, and heads nodded with each key moment. Afterwards, he looked my way and held out the microphone. Everyone in the room went still. I stepped forward. For the first time in 6 years, I wasn't shielded by a firewall or hidden behind an approval process. I was simply there, truly present in the room, and I consciously drew in a slow breath to center myself. "Hello, everyone," I began, speaking into the microphone, my voice calmer than I anticipated. "I'm Rowan Graham, and I suppose for many of you, this is your first time actually seeing me in person." A gentle ripple of laughter passed around the audience. The reaction was genuine, pleasant, a little astonished, but filled with appreciation. I admitted that I'm not particularly skilled at addressing crowds. Truthfully, I never imagined I would ever be up here. But 6 years ago, Elias Burton and I only possessed 2 items, an old couch and a concept. Our conviction was that, when designed properly, technology could uplift people rather than render them obsolete. I hesitated for a moment, letting my gaze travel across the audience, and that's when my eyes found her. My sister Aubrey, still standing by the far wall, set her champagne flute on the table beside her. She stood stiffly, her face impossible to read, her gaze fixed on me without wavering. She was working out how the sibling she once overlooked had managed to build the platform where she now found herself. I realized I wasn't the public persona of Quantivex Solutions, and that had always been intentional on my part. Yet tonight, I believed you deserved more than numbers calculated on a monitor. My presence here was for you, not for recognition, but because I was genuinely grateful. Another round of applause erupted, stronger than before. I inclined my head in appreciation and stepped aside, handing the microphone back to the host. Once the lights shifted from the stage to the dining area, I made my way toward the buffet, aiming to slip away into my usual secluded spot. But escaping wasn't an option. With each pace, another person intercepted me. "You're Rowan Graham? We didn't believe you actually existed. We thought you were some kind of legend." I kept a polite smile and replied with a few courteous words, but my thoughts kept returning to Aubrey Caldwell. My gaze shifted back to the pillar where she had stood only moments earlier, now vacant. She was nowhere to be found. I couldn't say when Aubrey had slipped out or how much she'd witnessed, but I sensed her absence instantly. It was as if the air itself shifted, a subtle missing piece where I'd quietly longed for her to be. That night, after returning to my apartment, I slipped off my shoes and collapsed onto the sofa. The silence in my home felt almost oppressive, especially after an evening like that. My phone vibrated endlessly, seeming to go on for hours. Notes streamed in from engineers, investors, and even my parents. "We're so proud of you," they said. "This is huge. You absolutely earned this." I grinned, sent replies to the messages that felt genuine, and deleted the ones that rang hollow with trend-chasing praise. But there was nothing from my sister. No calls, not a single message, not even a quick note of congratulations. I clicked open the live replay of the gala, skipping directly to the moment I took the stage, pausing the video to watch myself as I stepped forward. I didn't press play on the mic. Instead, I simply gazed at the paused image under that focused light. What did Aubrey see in that moment? A total stranger? Or the same little sister she once teased, calling me dull and fixated on spreadsheets? 4 days later, I arrived at the office earlier than usual, not to sign off on contracts or handle system maintenance, but to accomplish something for myself. In the conference room on the 13th floor, there was a drawer where I kept a compact box made of walnut. That box had been with me ever since college, moving between apartments, workspaces, and even server racks. I stored 3 items inside: a navy linen-covered notebook, a black fountain pen, and a card I'd written by hand. It had taken me more than an hour to craft the message, not because I struggled with words, but because I needed them to ring true. "Aubrey, I want to thank you for everything you've brought to Quantivex Solutions so far. You are incredibly gifted and intelligent, and I fully trust that you'll continue to accomplish great things. I feel a deep sense of pride working alongside you, even though our collaboration began in silence. I am Rowan, not your sister, not a message from a sibling, just the facts and a decision." I tucked the note inside the notebook and gave the package to the internal mail runner, offering only one clear direction: "See that this reaches my sister. Keep the sender anonymous." I didn't look for any acknowledgement. I had no need for one. It wasn't a gesture for reconciliation. What I offered was a threshold. Subtle, unlatched. The decision to cross it or not was hers. The following week drifted by without a word. Nothing came from my sister. No email, no brief note of thanks, just distance. Still, I began to observe a change. She stopped reclining in conference rooms, with her arms folded and that half-interested gaze. Aubrey arrived early, took thorough notes, and asked thoughtful, intentional questions. Her once theatrical tone had shifted to a more grounded register. One day, I lingered silently just past the doorway as my sister Aubrey stood confidently in the conference room, presenting a revised budget strategy for an AI project that had surpassed the original forecasts. She explained the updated modeling and spending projections as if she had engineered the platform herself. Her voice remained steady and composed. Instead of demanding attention, her body language made it clear she was there to make a difference, not just to be noticed. I didn't enter. I lingered in the hallway, my hands tucked in my coat pockets, giving myself a single nod. The following week, Human Resources sent out a company-wide announcement featuring a proposal that had been submitted by Aubrey Caldwell. The initiative, called Lift as You Lead, internal sponsorship, outlined plans to mentor junior employees, especially women in unconventional tech roles, by creating mentorship circles and organizing quarterly workshops with department heads. At the proposal's end, under Inspiration, she had inscribed in italics, "Inspired by the quiet mission of mine." I carefully read her proposal 3 times, allowing every sentence to resonate deeply. I had not been seeking acknowledgement, yet somehow, those words made an invisible burden inside me seem less heavy. That afternoon, at my routine break time, I walked into the break room. My sister Aubrey was at the counter, filling the electric kettle with water. I found her alone in the room. There was no hint of performance or any spectators. When I walked in, she glanced up and we both paused for a moment. This time, her gaze was soft, free of any sharpness. Her shoulders were relaxed, free of any defensiveness, only a gentle attentiveness. She offered me a subtle nod and, for the first time, I didn't see her as the sister who used to tease me for feeling unseen. Instead, I recognized someone truly paying attention. I was about to continue past her, treating it like any other uneventful afternoon, when my sister Aubrey spoke up. "The pen is lovely," she said quietly. "And the notebook. I've already filled a few pages." I turned toward her, startled but steady. "I'm glad it's something you've enjoyed," I said. She gave a faint nod, gazing into the mug she cradled as if it contained secrets beyond just tea. "I don't think I ever truly got you," Aubrey said after a moment. "Or maybe I simply never put in the effort." I stayed quiet. I felt no need to speak. There are times when only silence allows another person to get their thoughts out. "There's something I should say," Aubrey went on, her tone dropping to a level of honesty I hadn't heard in years. "You weren't required to give me this chance," she continued. "Not after all the things I said, but you did anyway. And you never held it over my head. You didn't try to overshadow me or embarrass me, nor did you ever try to make a scene about it." When Aubrey lifted her gaze, there was both unease and vulnerability in her eyes. "That reveals more about your character than anything I have ever assumed about you." For just an instant, I didn't see my sister who once barged in on my birthday wish with a trophy. I didn't see Aubrey Caldwell as my sister who once mocked me over brunch in front of the entire family. Instead, I witnessed a woman patiently letting go of her arrogance and slowly rediscovering humility. "I'm not sure if I can fix things," she confessed, her voice quivering, "but I'll give it a shot." A subtle exhale escaped me, the sort of breath I hadn't realized I'd been holding in for years. "We don't have to revisit everything that's behind us," I told her. "We just start again from here." We lingered silently for a while, standing shoulder to shoulder. No big audience, no stage lights, just a calm pause and gentle mutual understanding. There weren't any dramatic overtures or cinematic declarations, just honesty. I finally spoke the truth, and it was enough. To my quiet amazement, things truly shifted. Aubrey no longer commanded every conversation. She took time to listen and rarely cut anyone off. She gave others, especially the newer team members, space to speak freely, even when they faltered. She took on the less glamorous jobs, going through budget reviews and cleaning up the spreadsheets, the exhausting work she used to tease both of us about. I stopped shying away from looking at myself in the mirror. I began delivering talks during technical meetings, grabbed the microphone at orientation sessions, and faced groups of interns to explain, not out of arrogance, but with conviction, that leadership doesn't require volume, only a sense of direction. All it takes is knowing your destination. On a Friday afternoon, while I was preparing to head out, I walked past the accolades wall by the elevator. My sister's name was displayed right at the top. Q2 top contributor, Aubrey Caldwell. Aubrey stood just a short distance away, quietly taking it all in. When our gazes met, she gave me a faint grin. Thank you, she said, for continuing to believe in me. I returned her smile. This is only the beginning for us. That Saturday, my family gathered at the Syrup Barrel, a bright diner just off Pioneer Courthouse Square, where rays of sun fell on worn wooden chairs and that distinctive maple aroma clung to the air. Nothing about the setting had visually changed, yet there was an indescribable shift in the atmosphere. My sister, Aubrey Caldwell, arrived several minutes after the agreed time. She wore no heels or makeup, just a simple white blouse, jeans, and her hair loosely pulled back. As she approached, my sister Aubrey gave me a modest nod. I returned the gesture. There was no hug or outward display, just our presence together. Later on, while my mother chatted endlessly about her tomato plants, Uncle Leonard glanced my way with a mischievous smile. "So, Rowan," he joked, "are you still dabbling with those computers?" "Must be entertaining to work with numbers non-stop," I responded with a grin. But before I could say anything else, Aubrey placed her mug on the table. "Uncle," she announced with clarity, "Rowan is the most intelligent person I've ever met. I wouldn't be here if it weren't for her." Everyone at the table fell silent. Aubrey met my gaze directly. "She taught me something I once overlooked," she continued. "That genuine strength doesn't always announce itself first. It grows softly, and when the time is right, it comes forward through actions, not through seeking recognition." Uncle Leonard blinked. Aunt Marjorie offered a quiet, pensive nod. My mother reached for my hand and gave it a gentle squeeze. Once the meal ended and we gathered our things, my sister came up next to me, holding her jacket. "You don't have to." "Please forgive me," she murmured, "but I'm no longer the same person I used to be." I faced my sister Aubrey, and for the first time in ages, my smile felt undefended. "I know," I told her, "and I never expected an apology from you." We exited together, not saying a word. Yet the silence between us wasn't a barrier. Instead, it created space for something different to grow. That night, I found myself by the window with tea, watching Portland's city lights smear into the Cascade Range. A message from Elias Burton lit up my screen. "Heard, brunch wasn't half bad today," I replied. "It was pretty good. I'll think of this as a fresh start." Healing doesn't always come with a big announcement. Often it arrives when people truly see each other. Instead of holding on to outdated beliefs, I have learned that understanding can grow through quiet, genuine connection. My sister Aubrey and I may never fit the image of flawless siblings, but we no longer stand in opposition to each other. Now, we are two adult women, both transformed and still growing. For me, that is more than sufficient to end one part of our story and gently turn the page to what comes next.